Hi everybody, and welcome to another Sketch of the Week video. This week we're continuing our classic comedian series with Carol Burnett. One of my favorites from when I was a kid. Our family would watch the Carol Burnett show religiously and laugh and laugh and laugh. And she is another of the true comedian greats. So I kind of struggled a little bit about how I wanted to draw her because she's kind of got a couple of different signature expressions and looks, right? One of them is when she smiles, like this lower bottom image here, where she smiles with her mouth closed. And when she does that, it's the kind of smile that people do when they want to cover up their teeth. For whatever reason, they don't want to show their teeth. Their teeth kind of bulge out. It's especially true if somebody kind of has an overbite or just, kind of a big amount of teeth. And then when they smile, it creates this big mound that sort of sticks out. And usually that ends up creating a longer looking chin because that bottom part of the mouth is covering the lower part of the dental structure and the bottom part of the upper teeth. And that's kind of one of her signature looks, right? But she has got just a lot of teeth. Her smile, it looks like her front teeth are very much protrude, like she's got a big overbite. She doesn't really have a big overbite, but she does have a bit of her teeth kind of angle outward a little bit. And it just, when she smiles, you don't see her bottom teeth. And, this picture, particularly right here, is one that, for me, really captures kind of her look. And this is another, with the big wide eyes, too. That's the other thing that I remember of her, and one of the expressions that I always associate with her, right? And whenever you're drawing somebody where you're trying to capture them as a famous actor or a famous performer or whatever, there's a certain look or certain signature kind of expression that they are associated with, right? And it's sometimes it's hard to come up with which one of those or once really is the one you want to go with, right? So I always just go with ones that I identify them with, and the open mouth smile of hers, I think, is the way I'm going to go. So, all right, so let's get started. So she's got a very long face. That's pretty obvious. And I'm going to really base it on this 3/4 view here. So let's give her a long, narrow face, kind of head shape here. Let's see. Kind of sometimes when I do 3/4 views, I like to kind of work out the center axis of the face down the 3/4 shape of the head. She's got a long, thin neck here too. Right. So her nose, so she has kind of got a fairly good sized nose. Like, it's not big, it's wide and really round at the bottom, but I really want to emphasize her eyes and her smile, her mouth with this one. So I'm going to downplay her nose a little bit. I'm going to give her that big round ball that she's got at the end of it, but I'm not going to make that a signature, a big part. I don't want to draw attention to her nose. I want all the attention to happen to her eyes and her smile, right? And these really raised up eyebrows of hers, that's another signature thing. When she smiles, she raises her eyebrows up really high on her forehead. She's got big false eyelashes. We'll just kind of block that in a little bit. But this mouth, right, this is going to be what really makes this one work. So, and it's really wide. She's got a really wide smile. And the bottom part of her mouth is almost like a big, she kind of has a Muppet mouth, where she's got this big kind of round bottom that sticks out, the top part of her lip here. She's got a really strong upper lip. And then these teeth, they're going to stick out. You just see the tongue here. We don't see any bottom teeth here. All right, let's get this bottom lip in here. We don't see any bottom teeth. We see a little bit of the sides of her teeth from this 3/4 view. But this is, I think, a really important part of her look is the hidden bottom teeth and sort of the protruding kind of mound of. I think I need to make her. Let's erase this a little bit. I need her chin's a little pointier than that. Come on, Tom. Pointier yet. Her pupil and iris are these little tiny balls. She's got so much white around them that gives her that bright-eyed look. Okay, and so I'm basing most of this caricature so far, at least, on this color picture of her at the top. But I don't like her hair in that one. It's her hair in the one next to her, this one right here. That's kind of the hairstyle that I remember her having. It's a little kind of moppy. So I'm going to try to capture that hairstyle here. That's the one I want to add in. So it's a little messier, kind of curly, a little bit higher teased on the top of her head. And like I have said many times when I do these videos, that drawing hair is all about identifying the big shapes that are happening inside the hair and not being focused on every little tiny strand and curl. So she's got these big swoopy kind of curls that go along the top here. And her hair comes down a little bit right there. Oh, and the other thing about Carol Burnett, another signature thing with her, right, is the her pulling her ear, right? So I think I need to bulge this cheek out just a little bit more here. That was something that she always did when she was addressing the audience or talking to people. She would like pull her earlobe. So I'm just gonna do a quick. You almost can't do a caricature of Carol Burnett without doing the ear pull thing, I think. Okay, well, that's not too shabby. We're getting there. I don't think we really need to work too hard on the details here. Let's maybe flesh out the nose here a little bit. So she's got, she has kind of a sunken chin. Well, she looks like she's got a big chin. I got to make this chin a little bit bigger, I think. She has a little bit of a big chin, but when she's doing this kind of expression, that minimizes the chin a little bit. But when she does the closed mouth thing, that makes her chin seem a lot bigger. And you'll see a lot of caricatures of Carol Burnett will have her with an enormous chin, like the one in the opening sequence that I talk a little bit about that in the newsletter, where they really exaggerated the size of her chin, and that's really exaggerating her expression. It isn't really about how big her chin is. But this, the bottom part of her mouth sort of protruding out here is kind of a big part of her look. Really kind of pretty sloppy with this hand. We'll fix that in the final, I think. But yeah, so you can see I definitely minimized her nose. I could have given her a bigger nose. She does have a bit of a big nose, or a little bit bigger than I gave her credit for. But I didn't want to concentrate on that. I wanted her eyes and her mouth to be the focus. So, all right, it's coming along. Great. Well, let's print this out and go on over to the drawing board and finish this one up. So we'll see you over at the drawing board. Okay, here we are at the drawing board. We're going to get started on our final sketch of Carol. So let's just jump right in here. So ordinarily, when I teach people about drawing caricatures, and especially live caricature, I talk a lot about not doing details that you intellectually know are there but aren't important. And eyelashes are a good example of that. So I like to, the way I explain it is, you don't want to draw anything that is important that you wouldn't notice. I call it distance-specific drawing, I guess, for lack of a better term. And what that means is that if you know what is obvious to you while you're just casually talking to somebody, what do you really see in a person's face just from a casual talking distance, right? And everybody knows that eyebrows are made up of tiny little hairs, but you don't really see that when you're just talking to somebody, from just a normal distance. What you see is a vague, shape of values, like a big blob of values with kind of some hair texture sticking out here and there. So when I see somebody drawing a set of eyelashes and drawing every single little eyelash, I kind of cringe, because that's not what you see. When you're talking to somebody, that's not what you notice. Yes, intellectually you know that all those hairs are there, but why would you waste your time drawing them? Because they don't really add anything to the drawing. They're really just superfluous detail. And frankly, it makes your drawing look unreal, because you don't really notice all those little tiny hairs. Now, the exception to that is in a situation like this, where her eyes are the focus of the drawing, right? And she's wearing false eyelashes, and they're very, those hairs are very distinctly separated, and she's wearing mascara on her lower lids, and it's almost a clockwork orange sort of an effect, right? With her eyes. And so I am going to spend a little bit of time doing, some individual eyelashes that sort of stick up in kind of weird directions, because that's part of the look of her expression here. So I'm breaking my own rule there. Another thing I explain to people is like, look, you wouldn't draw pores, right, in people's skin. Like, that somebody's got little tiny pores in their skin, but you can't see it when you're just naturally talking to somebody, right? It's invisible to you, really. You'd have to look really close, kind of lean in, and then you can see that texture in those pores. But you wouldn't in a million years draw that, because those details become invisible and unnoticed to the casual observer. So anyway, but I'm breaking my rules here with the eyelashes for a particular reason. And these false eyelashes are really thick and kind of garish, actually. Anyway, so we're going to get these. She's got a really prominent upper lip. You can see how it kind of bulges out on the side here. And so much of that is just her expression, you know, and how she sticks her front teeth, and the whole upper part of her dental structure kind of sticks out and protrudes, bulges out, and then her lower lip covers up those bottom teeth, and that bulges out as well at the bottom. So a lot going on with her dental structure here. And it's a combination of her actual anatomy, you know, the physicality of her features, that she does have an overbite, and she's got some pretty prominent teeth, and she's got you know, kind of a prominent pushing out, sort of slightly oversized teeth, really, but it's the expression exaggerates that effect. And so it's a combination of both the expression and the physicality of her face that creates that iconic look that she's got. Ordinarily, I'd wait to do the darks here towards the end because I don't want to smear it all around. This is a pretty soft pencil lead. So this particular one is a 3B. I use like a 3B and sometimes a 4B when I do these, which is softer than your typical like school pencil, yellow Ticonderoga or whatever is. I think it's a 2H, or maybe it's a 2B. Sometimes they're 2H's and sometimes they're 2B's, but that's a harder lead than these 3 and 4B's, and so the softer lead gives you it's a little smeary. So I'm gonna actually switch back. So here's so this is a 2HB. It says HB2. So is this does that mean it's an HB, or is it a 2B? I don't know. Do some cross hatching and stuff to create some values in there later. Let's work on her hair a little bit. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm kind of using this hairdo, and her head's turned more, so I have to kind of compensate for that a little bit. But I like her hairdo in this one a little bit better. It says more Carol Burnett to me than the other one. Plus, I couldn't really see how the back of her head was working in that other one at all because it was hidden behind the door. She's peeking around the door in that photo. And I don't like to guess, you know, I'd rather actually see what's going on. So I could have just sort of faked it, but I like this this hairdo better anyway. It's more of the way I remember Carol Burnett's hair, which did change a lot over the years, but this is the hairdo I remember her having all the time. Trying to keep it simple, but it's just an awful lot of different directions and kind of gatherings of curls and locks going on here. Do a little upside down work. Trying to speed up how fast I do these things for for these videos because they're just a little bit too long. You know, I can end up spending a bunch of time rendering the crap out of something. I get lost in this part of any process. It's almost like a relaxing sort of thing to what I just term rendering. You know, all I'm doing is drawing it out. You know, the really hard the hard thinking and stuff has already happened. You know, the whole mapping it out and the caricature decisions are all done, and really this is just, you know, details and adding in the, you know, the finish quality, and so it's almost mindless. You know, I'm just drawing it out. Try to think about the highlights and shadows and the shapes that are getting drawn in here, what's going in front of what. You know, locks of hair coming in from behind this one up top, this kind of comes from behind it. It changes direction and goes behind this one. I do that little trick where when I've got a gap of hair, I do like a little textural sort of thing that shows me that there's hair going in other directions behind it. I think we need to bring this out a little bit more here. This out too. Have a little bit more bulk to her hair here. It's just a lot of layers going on here, and that does make for really interesting hair, right? Because you can have show these bits where a lock of hair comes down and then other shapes come from behind it, and it just sort of layers, it splits a little bit here, and again, I do not follow exactly what's going on in the hair in front of me. That'd drive me crazy. I'd go nuts if I was trying to do that. You want to try to capture the feel of the hair, really is it. So I'm taking a lot of liberties with how these curls really lay on her head and everything. Try to get the big landmarks. You know, if somebody's got a big spit curl or something, you obviously have to get that. And she's got this sort of bangs that comes down over top of her forehead from underneath these other curls, and then these curls sort of lay on top of that. And this one looks like it goes all the way across her forehead. And in here it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, so if there's something really interesting in the hair that I feel like, oh yeah, I gotta make sure I get that part, very specific curl or something like that, obviously that's important. But just the usual rule of thumb when you're drawing somebody or caricaturing somebody, if something sticks out to you, if you notice something, if you're like, oh, that's unusual, hey, pretty good indication, right, that that's something you really ought to make sure you include in the drawing. Better sharpen this pencil up. Okay. This hand here. Carol was also, at least in the 70s, she was famous for her costumes, like the clothes that she would wear when she came out and did her, you know, farewell to the audience that night, or her little audience interaction segment that she'd have. She had some outrageous patterns. So I'm just going to do some crazy pattern on her little. Actually doing pretty good on time here, so I think I'm going to actually get a lot of the cross hatching and stuff done on the video today. So I don't know, we'll just do some kind of goofy geometric sort of thingy. A low priority part of this drawing. All right, well let's take a little harder pencil here and we'll see about, let's go back to that one picture of her here. Do a little cross hatching in here, give it a little bit of volume. This one works pretty good as just you know, basic line drawing though. There's a lot of strong shapes in here that that then means that you don't necessarily really have to rely on the values of you know, the cross hatching and everything to bring it to life. If it works well as a line drawing, that's a pretty good win. But we'll still do some shadows here. Not sure I like that line, but okay. So she stretches her face out quite a bit when she does this type of expression, and she has kind of apple-y cheeks, you know, like pretty round cheeks, but you don't really see that too much when she's stretching her face out like this. So if you look at this picture of her, oh, not the rabbit, that was for another job. You can see that she's got, you know, kind of really round cheeks, so maybe we'll just round them up a little bit more. I'm definitely getting too many lines around her eyes now. This makes her look older, and we don't want that in this particular drawing. It's one of the things that is important is if you use a line for drawing, which I do. I mean, I'll always be a cartoonist before anything else, and so I think about things in line, and I see things in line, and I try to use line to interpret and draw things before I start relying on values. unlike a painter, who thinks in values and their work, it's the values that makes their work readable, whereas with cartoonists, and at least with me, it's the lines that make it, that I rely on. But as they say, lines work hard. So if you use lines, too many lines on somebody, they're going to look older. And again, that's especially true with live caricature. That's one of the things I always told people when I taught people to do live caricatures for theme parks or whatever, is if you're going to work in line, you have to make sure that your line work is minimal. Like, don't use 3 lines when you can accomplish something with 1 line. And actually, that caricature of Carol Burnett that I shared in the newsletter, or will share in the newsletter, from the animated sequence, is a great example of that. I mean, that is such a simple caricature, and it just uses minimal amounts of lines, and yet it's so expressive and really captures her effectively with just a few lines. And let me tell you, it's a lot harder to rely on just a few lines to be able to describe something that can be as complex as a whole person's face and expression, than it is to be able to have a whole arsenal of values and a full painterly sort of approach to your arsenal. It's cartoonists have to be masters of the minimalization of things, and to create something that is readable and that works, but without really being able to rely much on values to accomplish it. So it's a real trick. Editorial cartoonists especially, since they usually are less illustrative, and their cartoons are much more based on line, they have to minimize how they describe somebody, and what they come up with can sometimes just be really remarkable. So anyway, well, I don't know. I think we've probably reached end with this one. One of my favorites, Carol Burnett. I feel like maybe I didn't give her enough nose, but here she is. So, thanks for tuning in. I will be at the Reuben Awards this week, and next week I'll have a little, the newsletter will be kind of a review of the Reubens. Hope to remember to take some pictures this time around, so we'll see what we come up with for the video next week. I maybe have to do something quick because I'll be under the gun when I get home to catch up on all the stuff that I put aside to go play around with a bunch of cartoonists. But we'll see. So thanks as always for being a premium subscriber. I really appreciate that. And we will see you next week.